Speaking of which, I ran into your rich friend this morning. Oh, where? Over at Aiden's. I was picking up that new light stand, the one Brian's been looking at. I'm giving it to him for Christmas. And guess who was there? Mr. George Grayson himself. I've got to say, he's quite the looker, and Kate Aiden was all over him, acting all flirty. She introduced us, acting like she'd found her dream guy, but we both know Kate isn't too picky with her guys. Bridget tried to keep up her smile, thinking surely not Kate Aiden and George. She said, I think George's tastes are a bit finer than that. Caitlin gave her a look, trying to understand what she just heard. So, it's George now, is it? Bridget felt her cheeks go red. He did say to call him George. Nothing or maybe something. Is George your dream guy? Don't be silly, but she couldn't help blushing more. Caitlin took a sip of her coffee, picturing her sister and George Grayson together. You two would be a good pair. Bridget wasn't shocked Caitlin would say that. She often said what she thought, and Bridget had daydreamed about it too, but she pushed back. I barely know him. He's renting from you for the next half year, right? That's enough time, unless Kate or Aiden gets to him first. Bridget tried to sound cool. Kate's not what he's looking for, Caitlin said. How do you know? She's got all the looks, and she's always up for fun. What more could a guy ask for? They both chuckled and said at the same time, Does her dad own a bar? Bridget, hear me out. While that girl was pretty much showing off on the beds at the store, your George looked just puzzled. He wasn't buying it. That guy knows a thing or two, and I think we can make it so you're the one for him, Caitlin. I'm not so sure. When I asked if Mrs. Grayson would come with him, you should have seen his face. Someone's heard him a lot, he hides it well. But I guess he came to Ireland to escape her, and if that's true, then he really wants the quiet of the cottage. Even better, you're just right to help him forget who hurt him. Remember, in houses, it's all about spot, spot, spot. Now let's find you some better clothes. Later, Bridget and Ellie were in a cab heading home. It was near 4 o'clock, and the little bit of sun that day was almost gone. Bridget knew it would be pretty much dark by 4:30 this time of year. The short days and lots of clouds and rain made winter tough. But she was happy that this year, her Christmas was brighter thanks to a stranger who came out of nowhere. Bridget had picked up her daughter from school, and they had walked into Kinale to shop with bags full of food and some extras they hadn't had in a while. They were eager to get home, so Bridget chose a cab. It was a big spend, but Bridget knew they couldn't have carried all their shopping. Sitting in the cab, not looking at the beautiful scenes around, Bridget thought about what she and Caitlin had talked about. The food she bought showed she planned to make some tasty dinners with George coming over. Why had she let Caitlin push her into this? It was simple when she thought about it. She hadn't told her sister, but she really liked the tall guy from Canada. Sure, she acted like she didn't, but Caitlin knew her too well. Being the busybody she was, she got Bridget to see that giving it a shot with George wasn't a bad idea. Bridget felt a buzz of thrill. Was it just yesterday when they first met? As they went up the hill and got near the house, Bridget saw a bunch of cars and vans parked out front. There were men on the roof, too. What was going on? Was there some sort of emergency? But she saw no police or fire trucks. What was happening? Getting closer, she could see the names on the vans. One was the cleaning crew she used, another for fixing roofs, and one more, the biggest van, belonged to a furniture shop. As the taxi weaved through the parked cars to her front door, she also saw a van painted with a funny chimney sweep and a car that had Ross Wireless Service written on its side. She jumped out of the taxi and told Barry, the driver, she'd be right back. Barry, hang on a moment. Got to check this, she shouted without looking back as she rushed to the cottage. The driver helped Ellie out and went to get the bags. Bridget, dodging a ladder, noticed the door was newly painted. As she walked in, everything looked different, new paint, furniture, and curtains. But she was too shocked to take all the changes in. Once she saw Kate, Aiden, and George in the kitchen, she saw red. When she saw Kate in her tiny skirt and very tall shoes wrap her arms around George's neck and kiss him in a way that was way too bold, what made Bridget even more mad was that George didn't push her off. He seemed to like it. Kate, she got. She chased after anyone in pants. But George, her George. How could he? Then George pulled back. Since he was looking at Bridget, he saw her first. His face went from shock to sad as Bridget turned and left through the door. She moved fast, missed the ladder, and almost bumped into Pat, the boss of the roofing crew. She didn't really hear him say he couldn't finish now but would be back early tomorrow as she rushed past him with the big blue tarp in his hands. She kept her tears back until she had paid Barry, the driver. But as she walked into the house, she couldn't anymore. She looked at the food that needed to be put away and thought about the cost of the meals she had planned for George. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Ellie asked. "Yes, dear. I'm just tired," she lied. Ellie was smart and could tell when her mom was upset. This time she was confused. Her mom had been so happy while shopping and on the drive home. Ellie wondered if it was all the work at the cottage or maybe because of the handsome man who moved in next door. Bridget was in the middle of putting groceries in the fridge when she stopped. She just realized the roof of the cottage was gone. It was painted, and if she remembered right, the kitchen had new stuff in it. Who was going to pay for all that? She couldn't. George had tricked her with his visit this morning, just asking about some furniture. Bridget was furious. How dare he? He had a whole team fixing up the place in a big way, and there he was, kissing Kate Aiden in the kitchen of her grandma's little house. He might be with that Kate Aiden now, in his new bed. Her tears turned to anger. How could she have been such a fool? George Grayson was just like all men, not to be trusted. She made up her mind to face Mr. George Grayson first thing in the morning, and she hoped it would be the last time she had to deal with him for the next half year. Kate Aiden could have him for all. She cared if he was foolish enough to get tangled up with her, then they were perfect for each other. Claire Booth Luce once said, "No good deed goes unpunished," right? I had spent more than $12,000 fixing and making Mary's cottage nice, and what did I get for it? Well, I got a house that felt like home with all the comforts, like new stuff to use, Wi-Fi, and better electricity. The roof didn't leak, and the fireplace didn't smoke up the place anymore. Then there was that hot kiss with Kate. Aiden Kate was smart, pretty, and knew her way around decorating. She had a good time spending my money. She was a lot like Martha, they'd likely get along. As much as I liked the kiss, I knew it was a bad idea as soon as it was over. Right now, I didn't need any woman, especially not another Martha. That wasn't completely true, and that's where I was stuck. Bridget Lynn got under my skin, but in a good way. I was actually excited to get to know her and her daughter better over the next months. Did I want to be with her forever? No way. Or maybe I was so mixed up, I barely knew myself, let alone trying to get what a beautiful, younger woman who was also my landlord was all about. So, on the downside of things, I saw the look on Bridget's face when she caught me and Kate kissing. Well, to be honest, Kate kissed me first, and I won't lie, I liked it a lot. Kate said it was a thank you for letting her change the cottage how she wanted. Of course, the big wad of cash I left at her office made her happy too. I didn't get a kiss from the cleaning ladies, nor from Patrick, the guy who fixes roofs, nor from Brian, the painter, even though I'm sure they were happy with the extra money too. Just from Kate. But I'd lie if I said a kiss from one of the cleaning ladies, especially the thin one with dirt on her face and stunning blue eyes, wouldn't have been nice. Now, I was walking around my changed living room trying to make myself believe it was better to wait until tomorrow to talk to Bridget. I knew the best time was now, but I was dragging my feet. I had to make things right about all the changes I made to the cottage without asking her, mainly if she thought she'd have to pay for the new roof and the electrical work, which were fire risks just like the chimney. I needed to tell her I paid for everything and she owed me nothing. The harder part was explaining the kiss with Kate. I knew I should explain, even if I didn't have to. Bridget's look could have frozen us right there. What could I say? I clearly liked the kiss too much to say Kate was to blame. They do say the truth will set you free. I hoped it would, because I had no other plan if that went wrong. The thought of facing Bridget all fiery and mad turned me into a coward, so I just turned and left the house. The cold of the winter night hit me as I went across the yard without a coat. I got to her door quick, happy to see lights in her small house. I knocked and waited, heart loud. I thought this was silly. Here I was, a man with grown girls, a lawyer not great at being a husband, at the door of a lady I just met, saying sorry for a mess up. I didn't need this, but I had to tell her. I didn't want Bridget to think bad of me, even if she never talked to me again, at least I'd have said my piece. Why was she taking so long? Just as I was about to knock again, she opened the door. She looked surprised, sad, maybe a bit mad. Before I could talk, she said, "I thought you'd have plans tonight." I looked at her, I saw her beauty, and tried not to be mad about Martha. I just said, "Not tonight, or any night soon." Bridget's mad look faded. "Well, since you're free, come in. We need to chat," she said. She moved to let me in. I stepped into a cozy room full of old but nice things and a good fire going. No need for a chimney fix, I noted. Jenny, the dog, came by, happy. She had been a big help with fixing up the place. At least dogs still like me, I thought. I watched Bridget turn to me. She didn't tell me to sit or relax. She looked real pretty, hair in a ponytail, wearing a dark blue wool top that made her look nice, jeans that fit her legs just right, and flat shoes on her feet. She had her arms crossed, her face was red, still mad, hard to guess Bridget. "I'm here to say sorry and to tell you about the cottage," I said. She didn't seem happy, yes, still mad, I thought. "This morning, I only planned to get stuff for the cottage. I didn't mean to trick you, I just didn't tell you all," her green eyes sparked. "There's a rule that if you're in a hole, stop making it bigger, but I had to keep going. I needed her to understand I didn't do her wrong." I went on, even though she looked at me sharply. "Last night, I tried to make a fire, smoke filled the room, and the fireplace didn't work. It was so cold, especially with the windows open all night. Then it started to rain. I like rain sounds, but at midnight, the rain hit me. Me, not just a bit. It felt like a flood pouring on my face in bed. I saw her face change from mad to shocked. So, when I saw you this morning, I thought it was okay to call someone to clean the chimney, and I asked Mr. Patrick to check the roof. I didn't say I got his number from Kate, best not to bring her up. I thought he'd just fix a bit, and I'd tell you later. I was wrong. He said we needed a new roof and could get his team to start by noon. I'm sorry I didn't ask you first. I thought I'd see you later in the day, but I did pay him." Bridget looked a bit less worried when I mentioned that, and while they fixed the roof, the house got a new paint job too. I thought the place could look nicer, not saying it was Kate's plan. Then the new kitchen stuff came and broke the power. Mr. Patrick told us to call an electric fixer, and, well, you know how that went. Bridget's look got softer, I saw a small smile, and she was less stiff. I tried not to stare too much. "Oh, George, I had no clue," but then she looked sad. "I'll pay you back all of it." I went closer and held her hands. "Bridget, you don't have to," she stepped back. "I won't take handouts." Tears were almost there. I smiled. "Can I keep going?" She nodded. "Let me lend you the cash for 6 months. If I stay, we can cut the rent each month by a bit of the loan." Before she could say anything, I said, "I know summer rent goes up, so maybe keep it the same, and that extra can pay back the loan." She wiped her eyes and said, "Thank you, George, that works." We just looked at each other, then she asked, "Hungry?" "Forgot to eat with all this going on." "I'll cook something, come on." She started to leave, but I held her hands again. "Bridget, there's nothing going on with me and Kate, and never will be." She just looked at me, then nodded. We went to the kitchen, hands still together. That's how it began, no big love moves. I got a simple kiss on the cheek when I left, but it was enough to show I liked her, mixed with old bad memories. Or should I say bad memories staying with me, making me scared of getting hurt again. But every time I looked into Bridget's eyes, the life I left in Chicago felt so far back and far away. When I got back to Mary's cottage that night, that old life came back. I sat in my new soft chair in my room that had new paint and new stuff, with a happy fire and a drink in my hand, and turned on my computer. It quickly joined my new Wi-Fi. There were fewer emails than before. I got rid of many and saved some for later. There were some asks from the people I work with about the work I gave them, but nothing too hard. I was sure I could write back, safe in the thought they couldn't find me, unless Robert Pfizer put it together. Still no word from Martha or my girls, Emily and Olivia, but my phone had happy texts from them about coming home for Christmas and their flight to O'Hare. Martha still hadn't told them we were splitting up. I texted Oleg to pick them up from the airport, then I sat thinking about what to do next. I had hoped they would hear it from their mom, maybe in tears, saying how it was all her fault and I was leaving her. So much for that idea. When was Martha planning to tell them? I could see how it would go when the girls got home. "Hi, Mom, Merry Christmas. By the way, where's Dad?" "Oh, he's gone and leaving me." So Martha was making me seem like the bad guy. Okay then. I looked at my phone and saw it was midday in California, so I called. It took a few rings, and I thought I'd have to leave a message when Emily answered. "Hi, Dad. Merry Christmas. Did you see our text?" That was the toughest call I ever had to make. I felt dumb telling my girls I was in Asia and wouldn't be back for Christmas because I needed some time off. I tried to make them see that their mom and I were not getting along and this was for the best, but they knew me too well. "So Mom did something silly, right?" That's what they said, but it was more like they already knew. They must have seen the trouble before I did. I was trying to not be mad at Martha, so I just said they should talk to her about it. I promised my crying girls I'd keep in touch by phone and messages, and once I settled down, I'd have them over, maybe during spring break. But now I was in Ireland, living as George Grayson, and bringing the Randall girls over would be hard to explain to Bridget and the others in the village. Maybe I could travel to another part of Europe for a few weeks, rent a place, and meet my girls there. But as Scarlett O'Hara said, I'll think about that tomorrow. When I got into my new warm and cozy bed, I was mad and sad. This whole vanishing act was not going well. I was still helping my work friends, my daughters missed me, and my soon-to-be ex-wife still seemed to be messing with me. I wondered if she ever really cared about anyone but herself. That was a bit harsh, but I was not in a good place. The next morning, I felt a bit better, and after my run, I bumped into Bridget and met her daughter Ellie on their way to school. Later that day, Bridget and I had lunch together. That started a pattern. Most days, I'd see Bridget, usually in the village, for lunch or coffee, and sometimes we'd go to the Bullman for dinner. Ellie was loved by everyone, and sometimes we'd go to Bridget's house for tea after Ellie went to bed. Bridget and I would sit close on her big sofa in her living room and talk. I tried to listen more than I talked, not wanting to get caught in lies that would surely bite me later. I kept thinking it was dumb to start this act, especially if Martha didn't care about where I was or what I was doing. Living two lives would get hard and then just not work. It was on a quiet night when she shared about Brendan, her late husband's brother, and his clingy ways since Louis was swallowed by the sea. It was clear she was scared of him, as she spoke of his mean acts and how he didn't want to leave her alone. Anger bubbled up in me. She was scared for me too, telling me about Brendan's anger towards any man who got close to her. One day as we walked to her office after eating, she nodded towards him, standing not too far off. He was a big guy, taller than me by a bit and much heavier, with both fat and muscle. His hair was a mess, and he had a smirk that she found scary. I wasn't scared, but Bridget stopped me from going up to him that night. She held my hands and told me to be careful around Brendan because he had a nasty temper. I wanted to laugh it off, but seeing how serious and worried she was made me promise to keep away. Deep down, I knew Brendan would start trouble. This was one of the times I wished I was back in Chicago, where I had friends who could handle someone like Brendan if he got too threatening. Those shy pecks on the cheeks soon turned into tight hugs and a goodnight kiss at the doorstep, then into small kisses while sitting close. Nothing too fiery, but sitting by her, feeling her warmth as we watched storms come in from the Atlantic was enough for now. We were both careful, but it felt right to move slow. Midweek and Christmas week, I was alone because Bridget and Ellie went shopping with Caitlin and Cork. It looked like rain, and I was glad Patrick and his team fixed the roof so well, but I felt like I needed to get out. I thought about just making a sandwich, but ended up deciding to walk down to the Bullman. I put on my rain jacket and walked down the hill in the dark. Guided by the lights of Summer Cove on the water and the dim light from the moon, it showed me the way now and then. By that time, folks at the Bullman knew me, and I got a table near the fireplace in the bar. I chose the bar over the upstairs restaurant because I felt more at ease there without Bridget. I had just finished their great seafood chowder and fresh bread and was sipping on a cup of tea. I was hoping to see Bridget later, so I didn't drink any beer. I saw Brendan come in. He wore a wet fisherman's parka. Until then, he had tried to scare me and Bridget from afar, but I knew we'd have to face off sooner or later. He didn't stop or nod at the barman as he walked over to me and bent down over me. He was drunk and reeked of beer and sweat, plus he looked really mean. I'm only going to say this once, stay away from Bridget. She's mine. We have a deal, so you don't need to be around, he said. He seemed a bit taken aback when I quickly stood up, and we looked each other in the eye. Mr. Brendan, where I'm from, we don't talk about our ladies in bars. I remembered that line from Robert in The Quiet Man and thought it fit. Besides, Miss Lurin is a lady of honor, and she would have told me if there was anything between you two, which makes me think you're not telling the truth and that you don't know how to act right. Brendan's face turned red with anger, and he made fists with his hands. Right then, the bar guy grabbed his arm. Stop it, Brendan. Out now. Brendan saw how big the bar guy was and, even with drinks in him, thought twice about a fight. As he got pushed to the door, he spun around. This ain't over. She's mine, and you'll be sorry. After he left, the room went quiet for a bit. Then folks went back to eating and drinking, but they kept looking over at me. A light flashed, then boom, thunder hit just as Brendan made the air heavy, and the rain started to pour. I waited a bit, thinking Brendan would try to jump me. I put on my coat and was about to leave when the bar guy said, "Be careful." I nodded and went out, and careful I planned to be. Halfway up the hill to my house, there's a spot where you can't see much from either side. I knew he'd be there in the rain, waiting. Good thing I hadn't had much to drink. My hood was down, and my hair got wet, but I needed to listen for him. When I reached the spot, I thought he'd be there. Nothing. I was a bit let down but stayed sharp. That's when he burst out of the dark, yelling mad. "I'll kill you, you rat." I was ready, dodged his rush, and tripped him. He fell hard on the rocks, oomph, and I heard metal slide off into the night. So, whatever he had, maybe a metal stick, he didn't have it anymore. That made things a bit fairer. I didn't let him get up. He had size on me and could end me despite my boxing practice this past year. He was trying to get up when I hit him hard in the back and sides. With each hit, he made a sound. He swung his big arm and caught me on my leg. Ouch, that hurt. I stepped back in as he tried to stand and hit him lots in his belly. He stood up, even drunk. I knew it had to hurt. I punched hard, all my anger coming out. I didn't hit his head to avoid hurting my hand, aiming for his body instead. He ran at me again, yelling like a wild dog. I moved aside, helped by the dark, and kicked him as he passed, making him fall. I was on him again, punching nonstop. He got on his knees again, but then I hit him right in the spot below his ribs. He fell curled up, trying to breathe. I could have ended him then. Maybe I already hurt him inside bad enough, but I didn't think so. He was strong. I knelt next to him on the wet ground, panting. His mouth was open, his breath bad. The storm had stopped during our fight. Under the moon's light, I saw fear in his eyes as I told him, "Brendan, this is what you'll do. Take your boat, leave Canale. If you mess with me or Bridget again, I'll make sure you suffer a lot, and then you'll end up deep in the sea, tied to an anchor, just like your brother Louis." Right then, I saw it in the weak moonlight, not just fear of me or dying. I felt a chill knowing it and said, "You did it, didn't you?" He couldn't look at me. "You killed Louis in the sea, didn't you? You wanted Bridget to yourself." His face showed he was guilty. "Brendan, you better run far, but you can't hide from the bad in you. It's taken over, and the devil's waiting to drag you to hell." I got up, my heart racing. Then I did something I didn't know I could. I spat at him, my spit hit his face, and he blinked. Brendan groaned, got on his hands and knees, and threw up. He wasn't a danger now. I walked away, hearing him throw up on the wet rocky ground of Ireland. I couldn't sleep much that night. A couple of headache pills didn't stop my leg from hurting. Even drunk, Brendan could hit hard. Thank goodness he only hit me once. I kept thinking about the fight, and the bad fact that he had killed Bridget's husband kept bothering me. I didn't know what to do with that fact. I, for sure, couldn't tell Bridget. In fact, there was no way to tell anyone how I knew. Anyway, I sure didn't want to tell the cops. George Grayson had to stay hidden. That was another problem. As I lay there, I thought about the last few weeks and all the work that went into making it look like I had vanished, and for what? It seems Martha didn't care or just thought I didn't mean to leave her. I pictured a scene where I came home after being away for weeks, and there would be Martha, phone in hand, rushing out, saying, "Oh, there you are, George. Sorry, no dinner from me. Maybe Isabella can make you something. Got to go, bye." She'd kiss me quickly on the cheek as she passed, looking pretty and smelling good. Yes, it was almost funny. I had tried to say something big about our marriage and her being unfaithful, and what did it get me? My wife ignoring that I was gone and wanting to leave her. And my girls were sad because their dad wouldn't be there for Christmas with them. I made a big mistake. My job wouldn't leave me alone, even in Ireland. That was on me. Why didn't I just let the younger ones at work handle it? Was my fuss for nothing? Then I thought of Bridget. Nope, meeting her made everything better. Was it true? Yes, I was sure. She was pretty smart and had a great kid, and I liked her a lot. How much was I just an older guy trying to feel young again after my marriage went bad? Or was it a quick swap? I had so many questions. And what about Bridget's feelings for me? I thought I knew, but it wasn't clear. She knew I was running from a rough marriage. That should have made her careful. I was 12 years older. Was that too much? I had more money, and she knew it. Was she just acting shy to catch me? I hope not, but late at night, with the rain, it was tough to keep my thoughts in line. At last, I used my skills from court to calm myself. The good news was I was in a cozy cottage in Ireland with a lovely woman who liked me. Nobody knew where I was. I could just get rid of my phone, turn off my computer, and start fresh. If Martha didn't agree to the divorce, it'd go through anyway. But two big problems stuck with me. I was living a lie, and I hated hiding the truth from Bridget. And the more I kept it up, the harder it would be to fix. Also, I missed my girls. I couldn't stand losing them. These troubles were still on my mind when I fell asleep. My phone rang and woke me up. It was Tony Preston, and it was 5 in the morning. Quick math told me it was 9 at night back in Chicago, Tony said. Don't you ever sleep? No, if I do that, I can't ask you for more money, he laughed. So, where are you now? Oh, just out here on the West Coast, enjoying the sun and watching pretty girls play beach volleyball while you're cold in Chicago, I made up. Sounds great, wish I was there. Then how would you make all that cash from me? I'd still make you pay, but at least I'd be warm. So, Tony, is this call just to make my bill higher, or what's up? Just wanted to let you know that Robert Pfizer got caught by the feds this afternoon. They're after him for cleaning dirty money, being in a crime group, and other bad stuff. Our old buddy Barry Darren is stepping away from his politics to lead the charge himself, he laughed. Barry made sure it got on the news at night. Not sad about it. Yeah, I get it, but they caught Brian Douglas too, really? Robert's bad news, but Brian caught me off guard. Looks like they were both in deep, so it's going to be a mess for their company. Barry said they got a tip, started digging, and had to act fast to stop more bad stuff. You don't know anything about this, do you? Nope, I'm just here in California, chilling, happy in my retirement and far from Martha. Heard from her lawyer, nothing, and can't find who's helping her. It's weird. The guy who gave her the papers said she was too calm and called it a mistake. Well, if she doesn't reply in 30 days, I'll push for a win by default. That's still cool with you? I want it that way, and not going to change, sure, George. Just wanted to know, hey, you're not planning to fly out of here, right? I felt cold. No, why? Barry and his team will chat with everyone here, the big shots and top folks. All our money stuff is called for, and they'll check it all close. If you think they might find something, I know the best guy to help. I think I'm okay, Tony. I'm clean, and hey, they just made me senior partners since I was the one who tipped off Barry. I felt safe. Yeah, thought so. I've known you since we both got hits from Sister Beverly back in school. I'd be sad to learn you were mixed up in this mess. Thanks, and what mess are you talking about? Do you know, or just thinking? Heard that Robert and Brian were sneaking money with the mob, even in their own pockets. Wow, that's dumb. They were already rich, Tony said, and the feds found over $25 million in cash in a place. That's a win for Barry for sure, he laughed. Guess they thought they'd never be caught. Who do you think ratted them out? Good point, Tony. Someone got mad, no question, I said, knowing it was me. Got to go, happy hour and beach volleyball wait. Just remember, George, stay in touch and no leaving. I've got all I need here in sunny California. It seemed messing with Robert Pfizer worked out just as I hoped. The mob guys would be mad, a lot of their cash was now locked up by the feds. I wondered where they kept all that money. That made me think about the $5 million I got from Rodney Spencer. Was it from Robert or his bosses? I thought it was Robert's cut, since $5 million was small compared to the whole, which was likely in the hundreds of millions. I hoped he was taking a bit on the side, but either way, he wasn't getting it back. What would I do with it? I hadn't decided yet. So far, I hadn't used it. If anyone checked my money, they'd only see my own spending. Even if my cash was hidden away and in places like Madrid, a bad thought hit me. What if Robert dragged Martha into this mess? It would be just like him. I hope not. I didn't think Martha was foolish enough to get mixed up in something dirty. And even with her stepping out on me, I didn't want her to meet a bad end by someone hired hand. So what to do about her? Just letting it go seemed the best choice, but that might not make her see the truth. What was she up to? Sure, we drifted apart as our jobs got busy, but I still loved her. Despite all chances, I stayed true. That's what being married means. Sticking to those big promises. With a heavy heart, I thought it might be time to face her and show her some photos. Then I slept again for 3 hours, feeling somewhat calm since I had a rough plan. It was 2 days before Christmas when I got out of bed again that day and started my coffee. I went through my work-related emails, which were full of gossip and news. I removed the majority of them. A few complimented me on my usual good timing. That morning, that gave me a smile. Since Bridget had gone to her office, I was certain Ellie wasn't in class. I cleaned up and then went into Kale Pass, where I had gotten into a fight with Brendan the previous evening. With the sun shining and the rain having stopped, the day felt warm for winter. Where the fight took place, everything appeared normal. I was relieved that I hadn't killed him. I didn't think I was the one to judge whether or not he deserved it. Then, as I approached Bridget's office, she waved me over while grinning and taking a call. Her green eyes gleamed. My heart warmed up. Ellie, seated at a tiny desk, grinned as well. Bridget had on a white sweater and a gold Christmas tree pin today. Her face was nicely framed by her hair. From where I was, I could only see that. She was really lovely. With a somewhat worried expression, she ended the call, tapped away at her keyboard, and then inquired, "How was your night?" "It was late when we got back. I hope to see some light at your place." She stood, and I approached her to take her hands. She was wearing heels and a dark skirt. As usual, she looked fantastic. She looked hurried again and touched my face. "Bridget, I missed you, but for some reason, I was super tired last night, and then I couldn't sleep well until after 5 this morning. Sorry." Her hand felt smooth and cool. She attempted to pull away, but I held her hand there and asked, "George, are you okay?" She blushed when I released her, saying, "Never better, never better." She was really lovely. Feeling normal again, I asked, "Want to go for lunch?" With Bridget's nod, I assisted her in putting on her coat. She had a wonderful scent. The three of us headed down to the port to a favorite fish restaurant. Bridget looked around, as I saw. Though she made an effort to hide it, I knew she was searching for Brendan. He had vanished from view. Hoping he'd heeded my words and gotten out of town. She told stories about her day out shopping with her sister in Cork during our dinner. Bridget and Caitlin had a great time, and Caitlin's husband had taken care of the kids. Hearing about her day out with her sister was interesting. It brought back memories for me. I couldn't remember the last time I had a meal conversation with Martha, or any other conversation that wasn't about some upscale Chicago social event she attended or assisted with. Not having our girls around meant that work was the only topic of conversation, and I'm sure she wasn't thrilled to tell me about her adventures with Robert Fisher. About her part in the school's Christmas play, Ellie was giddy with excitement. "Mr. Grayson, will you be there?" she inquired. When I glanced at Bridget, she smiled affirmatively. After eating, Bridget's arm was in mine as we strolled back into town. "Ellie, I'd be glad to. Thanks for asking." We looked at storefronts, and I mentally noted the things she seemed to like. At her office, I received her usual warm embrace and a quick kiss before we parted ways. I grinned as I went. I went shopping and explored the town for the remainder of the day. I found myself standing before a large gray church. St. Robert the Baptist was listed on the sign. I hadn't been inside a church in a very long time, not since my mother's funeral 2 decades prior. When I was 25, she had died of cancer. We had all suffered greatly, but particularly my dad, who lived for a mere 5 more years. Even though I hadn't really stayed in touch, I knew that my 3 sisters continued to attend church. This year, they would also be expecting me for the big football game and family dinner. Martha also skipped a lot. She found it too exuberant. She said that my youngest brother, Scott, was a Marine in Afghanistan, and that my older brother lived far away in Singapore. Climbing the stairs, I half expected the doors to be closed, but this was Ireland, so they opened easily, allowing me to enter the peaceful church. Winter sun streaming through windows made of colored glass. I took a seat at the back. I sighed as I looked out the front and felt a familiar sensation return because it was so quiet. Why did I cease attending? It had been so long that I was unable to recall. Martha was more interested in work and money than she was in church. It's not entirely fair to say that, though. Martha had been a wonderful wife and mother for many years. When did we start to drift apart? I was lost in thought for a while when an elderly man, possibly in his 60s, who was tall and thin and dressed in dark pants and a church collar shirt, approached from the side. He didn't appear to notice me until he was standing by the speech stand, possibly reviewing notes for his Christmas speech. I returned to my thoughts, listened for his footsteps, and then looked up. He stood close to me and said, "Welcome," with a distinctly Irish accent. It's a small place and not a busy time, so I wasn't surprised he knew me, but the way he said it made me think. Then he seemed to know me and said, "So, you're Bridget's Canadian." Was he implying that Brid was just someone I rented from, or had she told him more, or was it simply gossip in the community that we were becoming closer? I just nodded, even though I hadn't followed the church in years. I didn't want to fib to a priest up close. He did seem in his 60s, with a wise and kind look. I was pretty sure he had heard it all in his time as a priest. He looked at me like he could see right through me. "What's bothering you, my son?" So, for the first time in 25 years, I spilled my guts to a priest sitting next to me in that beautiful church. When I finished, he just stared out the window at the dimming sky, then looked back at me and said, "You're George Randall from Chicago, not George Grayson from Canada, right?" I nodded. "George, it sounds like you're finally on the right path with the plans you've shared. I'm relieved you haven't messed up with Bridget. I've known her forever, and she's precious. Life's been tough on her, she deserves happiness, and you can give that to her. But she's also fragile, and you could really hurt her. You've got to be honest with her. Your reason for pretending to be someone else is a bit twisted, but I think she'll get it." He paused, staring at me. "Now, think. What are you really running from?" I considered a few fast responses, but I took my time. "Well, Father, I wanted to get away from my wife. Her cheating cut deeper than anything else ever has," he said quietly, "and I had to get away from my job. Not just because my boss betrayed me and everyone at work knew it, but because I was tired, burned out after 20 years of nonstop stress. Martha cheating and my job promotion just broke me. I couldn't stand to be around any of them or face another day in my office or in court. I was finished." "When did you and your wife last go on a holiday, just the two of you?" he asked. I looked at him. "I can't remember." "So, with both of your jobs, you lost track of who should matter most, each other." I nodded with a heavy heart. "And somehow, you got used to thinking work was everything." "Yes, you forgot that keeping a marriage good takes work every day." "Yes, but she betrayed you." "Yes, she did. I'm not saying it's okay what she did, but when a marriage ends, there are always two sides. Often, we stop seeing what matters most." I just stared at him. "Do you still love her, George?" "I do. I think if I didn't, I wouldn't feel so bad." "Can you forgive her?" "Think before you answer. You need to forgive to move past this, whether you stay with her or not. But you don't have to forgive right away. You're mad and sad and feel lost without your partner of 25 years, plus your pride is hurt. That stings a lot, especially since she was with someone you look down on. Doubting yourself will only make things worse." Father Andrew was right, even though I didn't want to admit it. I was stuck in self-pity, and it was affecting those around me. Life was rough. "Now, about your wife. The church doesn't like divorce. You didn't marry in the church, but you should still talk to her. You know you should. She's been making decisions, but now she needs to know how much she hurt you. Maybe she hasn't talked because she doesn't care, or maybe she's just in shock. You left her, after all. She needs to face what she's done to your marriage." His words made sense, even though part of me wanted to ignore them. I knew I had to listen to his advice. If you choose to divorce, then you and Bridget have big choices ahead. She's been super happy these last few weeks. I trust you'll keep it real with her. As for your job, you do need a break, and if you can't see yourself going back to your old job, then it's time to look for something new. George, from what I've heard about you since you got here, you're a doer, and from what you've shared, you view yourself as a hero for the little guy in Chicago." He said this with a smile. "You seem to love standing up for those who can't do it themselves. You're too young to just hide away in Kenale. Think on that." He paused, then added, "Brendan is a mean guy, and he might deserve a tough lesson. Though I'm not one for violence, but the way you talked about your fight with him seems right. You think he did something really bad to his brother, and I believe you. Seeing he's a guy who can do really bad stuff, I hope he decides to tell the cops the truth." Father Andrew told me I was forgiven, plus gave me lots to think about. I felt a lot better, maybe because he helped me see things clearer. I spent the next hour making calls. My brain was still racing as I walked up to my cottage. Seeing a police car there puzzled me. When I got close, the two officers, a man and a woman, were just leaving my door. "Mr. Grayson?" "Yes," the big guy, maybe in his 40s and wearing a suit, said. "I'm Inspector Cillian, and this is Sergeant D," nodding at the smaller, dark-haired woman in uniform next to him. They didn't try to shake hands. "What's this about, Inspector?" His face was red, and his nose looked like it had seen a few fights, kind of like some cops I've seen back in Chicago, especially the older Irish ones. "Can we talk inside?" My heart was pounding as I tried to stay calm. Was I caught? Surely Father Andrew hadn't ratted me out. I was confused. When we got to my place, they didn't take my offer to sit down. Inspector Cillian shook his head. "Mr. Grayson, when did you last see Mr. Brendan?" "Keep it together, you've dealt with worse cops in courts before," I thought to myself, almost losing my cool when they asked about my fake passport and my presence in Ireland. "Just last night, around 8, I think. He came at me at Bullman's. He was drunk and mad at me." They weren't writing anything down, so I guess they already knew about it from Bullman's. "What then?" I asked. "I left the bar about 15 minutes later and walked home in the heavy rain." "And you didn't see him?" "No, I thought maybe I would, but he was so drunk, I thought maybe he just found a place to sleep it off." I said nothing. They exchanged a look when I asked, "Did something happen to him?" The inspector continued, "Mr. Brendan planned to go fishing with some guys this morning, but no one has seen him. His boat is in the bay, and his car is still in town. No sign of him at his house." I inquired. Once more, their gazes met. "He lives on the boat, and his small boat is still at the dock." "Oh, maybe he's still out somewhere, sleeping." "He was very drunk," said the officer. I noticed Cillian's card on my counter. They said, "If you see Mr. Brendan, please call us." Without saying anything more, they departed. I noticed the sergeant examining my hands and the surroundings as we conversed. I'm glad I didn't have to justify the large bruise on my limb. Brendan was thus absent. Without his boat or his car, he would not go. He was probably sleeping somewhere, licking his wounds. However, I secretly hoped he would disappear forever. He was a dangerous man who could kill me and my loved ones. He was a bad man. I had given him a serious warning, and I would have to take action if he returned. I accompanied Bridget to Ellie's school that evening for the annual Christmas play. While some seemed perplexed, many had known me since I arrived in Canale or had seen me around town. Similar to Callum Patrick, who mended my cottage's roof. I carried a drowsy Ellie up the hill after the show, and we put her to bed. Bridget put her head on my shoulder and gave me a side hug as we stood by her bed. Then we took a seat on her sofa in the living room, close to one another. I embraced her with my arm. When she finally looked up, she had a question. I kissed her lightly. She leaned in closer, asking, "Does that answer your question? You're really leaving your wife?" I asked. "Oh, I get it. Many married men might say that to trick younger women. But, Bridget, that's not me. She was unfaithful with one of my business friends. I can't overlook that. It's not just silly male pride, I'm deeply hurt. I could never trust her again. Trust means a lot to me. You get that?" She smiled and nodded. I had to be honest about more things than I wanted to. Would it bother Bridget if I kept things hidden? Time would tell. I took her hands in mine. "There's more to it," I said, looking surprised. I explained that I was a Chicago lawyer named George Randall, a partner in a large firm, and that I had devised a convoluted scheme to leave my wife and my life in Chicago. It sounded even sillier the second time I told it. Bridget was crying as I left. I didn't get enough sleep, so I felt horrible when I woke up the following day. I had gone to Ireland to unwind and sleep, but I had no luck. My quiet life was going to be ruined. I wanted to be George Grayson, a recluse, now. However, I later developed feelings for a charming Irish girl. Oh no, when I went for an early run, it was already beginning to rain. I sprinted hard, trying to get away from my work, Martha, and the mess I made when I told Bridget the truth and then lied again. I questioned why I attended that church at all. Mom was wise beyond her years and would often say, if you want to see if God laughs, tell him your plans. The wind was stronger when I returned, bringing with it a large storm from the sea. I was completely drenched. I walked in and was shocked to see Bridget curled up in my chair, warm from the blanket. She had a calm appearance. I snuck past her to the bathroom so I could shower and change out of my wet clothes. Her presence caused me to reflect. Why? It was nice having the hot shower. I didn't want to get out. However, I was curious, or perhaps more accurately concerned, about Bridget's reaction. Maybe she was here to say she never wanted to see me again because I lied, and she couldn't take that. My hands were too unsteady to shave. I put on a thick robe and peeked at her from the hallway. I got dressed in jeans, a warm sweater, and slippers while she was still asleep. I walked back, getting ready for what was next. But she wasn't in the chair anymore. Did she get scared and run away? When I walked into the living room, I saw her in the kitchen. She was making tea and getting things ready for a snack. The toaster was on, maybe tea and scones. I hoped this was good. I saw Bridget, and before I could talk, she ran to me and hugged me tight. We were quiet for a bit. Then she stepped back, tears on her face. "Oh, George, please stay with me. Don't go," she cried and hugged me again. "I'm sorry I lied," I told her softly. I had to tell you, I hoped you'd understand. I was dumb. She looked at me, her sad eyes making me melt. "I love you, Bridget." I really did love her. Her eyes got happier, and she hugged me hard. "I love you so much, George. It hurts when we're not together." We kissed. If it wasn't for the tea kettle singing, we might not have stopped. Bridget wiped her tears and got the tea and scones ready. I stayed close and helped her bring it to the table by the fire. We sat close on the couch. She looked a bit sad when I said I had to go back to Chicago, but understood. I needed to see my family and daughters for Christmas, and I had to see Martha. She looked strong as I said I'd be back in a week. She surprised me by asking, "George, will you come to Mass with me tonight? It's the midnight service for Christmas Eve." I smiled, nodded, and stayed close, thinking of a future with a woman who really cared about me. The late-night service was full, and the church had all the bright and happy signs of Jesus' birth. Ellie had a short sleep before, so she was not tired. Bridget, as pretty as ever, wore a dark wool skirt, a red silk top, and black boots. She stood close by, holding my hand. Ellie was next to her, and next to Ellie was Caitlin, in her bunch. Her man, Shane, seemed real kind. Outside the church, Caitlin gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I wondered what Bridget could have said to her. I placed a large gift in the offering plate. I needed to hear what Father Andrew had just said, even though it was obvious. The Bible's Luke tells the Christmas story, and Bridget squeezed my hand as we heard the opening line, "And it came to pass in those days, there went out a rule from Caesar Augustus that all the land should be counted." We greeted Father Andrew at the church door following the service. He shook my hand, nodded at Caitlin and Bridget, patted Ellie's head as she slept in my arms, and said, "There you are, George. I saw you with these angels." Both ladies looked shocked. He remarked, "You are a lucky guy." After giving him a brief glance, I said, "Yes, Father, I am. And thanks." He nodded and said, "I hope to see you at Mass in the days to come." Bridget looked confused, so I corrected her, saying, "As long as I'm with these angels, I'll be here." We both laughed. As we made our way to the car, Bridget questioned, "So, you know Father Andrew too?" While I carried Ellie, she held the umbrella. Sure, K-Sale's not that big, you know, I laughed. As the rain started to fall, Bridget just grinned and shook her head. We returned to Summer Cove in the rental car. That early Christmas morning, Bridget and I exchanged gifts after getting Ellie in bed. I showed her my love by giving her a gold heart on a chain. I wrapped it around her neck, and her eyes glowed. She gave me an antique silver watch that had belonged to her grandfather and father. It contained a picture of her. Used by men who had given Bridget a lot of care, the watch was elegant but ancient. This moved me so much. Thanks, Bridget, it's lovely. I'll keep it safe. It was almost time for me to go. We had a long embrace. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Good night, Bridget, my dear. I'll see you in a few days. Happy Christmas. I love you. Happy Christmas, George. Please be safe. I love you. I'll pray every day you're safe and come back," she replied. She ignored the rain as she walked me to the car. She kissed me again and said, "Be safe, my love, and come back to me." After leaving the house near Summer Cove, I drove off to Dublin in order to catch a flight to Chicago on Christmas Day. I would arrive at my lakeside Chicago home in plenty of time to spend Christmas with my children. I would have time for the Randall family dinner and football fun, and friends had kindly set up a tree and decks. I smiled to myself, thinking of Bridget with my 3 sisters and their children. I felt calm inside for the first time in a long time, and I had a ticket back. Hi there. Please feel free to forward these contents to your friends and family if you find them useful. In addition, as is customary, if you like this video, please click the like button to support our podcast in reaching a larger audience on YouTube, as the platform favors videos with a high number of likes. You might also think about becoming a subscriber to the channel so you can be notified whenever I post something new. YouTube will let you know as appropriate. I appreciate your help, and I hope you have an amazing day.